Hey, welcome to DIY Holiday Decor with Deschutes Public Library. My name is Sammy Cursell and I'm a community librarian here. And today we'll be making two crafts. We'll be making both felt mistletoe and a felt deer ornament for you to decorate however you wish at this time of year. Before we start actually crafting, I do want to share a little bit of the history of mistletoe and ornaments with you because it's kind of fascinating and I always love knowing where things were in the past and how we got to today. So mistletoe, I'm sure most of you know this, if not, here's a fun fact for you, but mistletoe is actually a parasitic plant. It only grows on other trees. So it grows on predominantly willows, apple trees, and oaks, and it gets there through the droppings of birds. So fun fact, but it kind of is interesting, especially if you think about what we use it for and its symbology. So in ancient cultures, mistletoe had a lot of medicinal uses. They used it as balms and poultices and with tinctures, and they used it for many, 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 many different purposes. I'm not going to go into it because there's so many different ones, but you can look it up online. It is kind of fascinating. Symbology-wise, though, amongst many different cultures, mistletoe has had some pretty similar symbology. And so, for instance, mistletoe has been symbolic of fertility, peace, vivacity, and love. And if you look at the plant, a lot of this has to do with just how it functions. So it has this beautiful white berry and it blooms in the dead of winter when most things around it are dead. So that's kind of one of the stems, at least, of its symbology, is just the plant itself. Otherwise, there's a lot of mythology and rituals that are tied to mistletoe and throughout history amongst many different cultures, but two of them that I pulled out. The Celtic Druids used mistletoe in the ritual of oak and mistletoe, and during this practice, they sacrificed, I think, a bull or an animal. It happened on the full moon, and it was a ritual for fertility. So obviously that symbology is related to the ritual itself. Then in Norse culture, they had a myth that, or now we believe it to be a myth, that the goddess Frig's son, the god Baldur, was killed by an arrow made of mistletoe. And after he died, Frigg vowed that mistletoe would kiss anyone who passed underneath it, and that it was never going to be used as a weapon again. So you can kind of see how that history has adapted and changed over time into how we use it. Mistletoe didn't start to have its similar uses and connotations with Christmas until about the 18th century England in the working class, and also predominantly with servants. Now, mistletoe at the time, and very similar to today, meant that a man could kiss any woman that was standing underneath it, and it was bad luck if that woman refused. Now, I am glad that we have consent and can say no, and it's not bad luck now, but that is kind of what the origins at least were at the beginning. They also had an alternate version of this, a little change, where it sounds like it wasn't for, like, it was kind of household to household if they had this tradition. But if you were standing under mistletoe, you were supposed to pluck a berry from it for every kiss, and you couldn't stop kissing until all the berries were gone. So I'm kind of glad that that's not what we do today, because I would hate to get stuck underneath there. But that is a little bit about the history and origins of mistletoe. Now, ornaments have a very unique history as well, and they actually originated in the 16th century in Germany. They created paradise trees, which have relation to the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, and they were decorated with apples, obviously going back to that forbidden fruit. And this paradise tree eventually over time adapted more into the Tannenbaum, the Christmas tree, but it was that original decoration of the apple that kind of morphed into these ornaments that we use and think of today. So the apple adapted into decorations including candy canes, candles, pastries in the shape of angels, flowers, hearts, and stars, and later blown glass. And apparently some of the first glass ornaments were tied to one person who decided to make a blown glass apple because he didn't have access to apples. So it ties back to that really early first use of ornaments on a tree as well. And also they were creating blown glass beads, which were then used often as garlands around the tree as well. Now, these ornaments and the use of them spread pretty easily throughout Europe, predominantly in Germany and in England, but across a lot of Europe as well. And they didn't make their way to America until about the 1770s during the Revolutionary War, when Hessian soldiers came over to fight. And many Americans didn't like it at all. So the Christmas tree and Christmas have pagan origins and a lot of pagan symbology included, and many Americans thought the use of ornaments and cutting down trees to be very frivolous, so they were not into it whatsoever. So it didn't actually gain acceptance in America until about the 1800s, when there was a steep increase in the number of German and English immigrants coming, and they were bringing this tradition with them. And then later in the 1800s and the 1840s, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were depicted in a publication in front of a decorated tree at Christmas time with ornaments all over it. And it grew in acceptance because the wealthy class in America really glommed onto this usage because they were fascinated by royalty and the titled class in England, and wanting to kind of replicate that experience here in the United States. So they were going out and seeking out ornaments and decorating trees in their own homes, which eventually, of course, trickled down throughout the classes and into the common home like mine. And so that's kind of an interesting history of ornaments and a little piece of how trees, the Christmas tree has changed as well over time. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Christmas or about crafting ornaments or crafting for the holidays, we have tons and tons of books about those topics, and there's just a few listed here. If you're interested in other religions that happen, or other holidays that happen at this time of year, we also have tons of books on them as well, and lots of other crafting books, so we definitely recommend checking those out as well. I've also highlighted Creative Bug because the two crafts that we're going to be doing today actually kind of originated from Creative Bug, but I've adapted them a little bit so that they're a little bit more accessible for us. Just time-wise and supply-wise, so you can easily recreate it at home. But I also recommend go onto Creative Bug and check out all the other holiday crafts that they have, as well as all the rest of the crafts that they have for the rest of the year. They have so many different things. They have paper crafts, they have felt crafts, they have beading, wire, they have decorating for cookies and crafts. I mean, lots and lots and lots and lots of things. They have so many sewing projects, so definitely check it out. I love it. It's definitely something that has kept me busy and entertained this year. And while we're not ending, I did want to say thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, please reach out because I'm happy to help if it's something related to the crafts that we're going to do or any of the information that I've provided today. I am happy to communicate with you and talk with you further. So this is my email address. And also, I just want to take this moment to ask you to, if you have the opportunity and you are on social media, please share your craft because we would love to see it. Either sharing it with the rest of our customers or just seeing how phenomenal you all are in your craftsmanship as well. So please share it online and tag us at Deschutes Library. We would love to see it. So we are going to now get started with our craft, and we are going to jump in first to our mistletoe craft. To make our felt mistletoe, you will need a couple of things. If you have a kit, all of these things are inside. You will need 3 felt mistletoe. You have 2 different colors, but if you're making this from scratch, you could use however many colors you would like. You need ribbon, little white felt berries, and some glue to glue the berries onto your felt. And if you received a kit, you just have a little bit in a baggie, but otherwise just any craft glue will work well for this.
If you did not receive our craft kit, the things that you will need are a piece, at least one piece of green felt, as well as a piece of white felt for you to cut both the berries and your leaves out for the mistletoe. And you will need some ribbon, whatever ribbon you would like. And of course, that craft glue. The first thing we need to do to start making our mistletoe is we need to make our felt look a little bit more lifelike. And the wonderful thing about using felt like this is that we can actually do it just by pulling on the felt. So you'll notice in my original one that I've kind of pulled on it so that it gives it a little bit of texture rather than just laying flat. So to do that, you'll just pull in a couple different directions on your felt. You'll kind of get the feel for how you want it to look, but already you can see that it now has a little bit of definition and no longer looks flat, so it'll add some great texture and detail. What you're going to do is you're just going to repeat that step for each of the little leaf petals on your mistletoe on every piece. So a couple of things that I feel like I've learned from doing this is you want to make sure that you're holding it with two hands so you don't pull it wrong and disconnect your felt from the rest of the piece or overstretch it. You can at least kind of control it a little bit better, and also that it's somewhat forgiving. You can always try and pull it in a different way. Also, if you're wondering how I created these shapes, I actually used a Cricut Maker to do this, so I could get all of the kits made and to this point for you, so you could do it at home. But if you are creating this yourself, what you'd want to do is you just want to cut it out either freehand, or if you found a template of these like mistletoe leaves online, you could easily trace it onto the felt and cut it out from there, or pin it and cut it out. So now we have our 3 pieces of mistletoe, and what you're going to do is you're going to kind of just stack them in a way that you think will look nice. So I'm going to stack, I kind of like this shape. You can choose which way you want it facing, if you want it facing forward or backward, or which side you want it facing. And then you're just going to stack them. And if you have enough ribbon, you could tie a loop in it so you can hang it. Otherwise, you're just going to tie a little bow, and you can add a little bit of string or pin it however you need to, wherever you're going to hang it later. But I'm just going to tie my pieces of felt at the top, just like that. Just tight enough so they'll stay together, but not too tight that they're really looking like they're struggling up there. Okay, now that you have it knotted, you can tie it however you want. You can either do it as a bow or leave it in a knot, whatever decoration, whatever style looks best for you and your house. I think that works great. I am going to show you how to tie a bow so that it looks nice and neat like this one, because I always have to remember. But you're just going to take one loop. Instead of looping it around like you normally would tie your shoe, you're actually going to go the opposite direction and loop it. If I can do this, loop it through the opposite direction, and that'll put your bows, your loops, at the top. And then you can kind of adjust the little loops however works best for you. You can continue to adjust your ribbon and your bow however works best for you. Something that might be handy to have around is a pair of scissors. So you can just kind of snip them. Let's see, which direction do I want to go? Snip them however works best. So there is my ribbon. And the reason why I did that is so that it would kind of hold everything together while I get ready to put my berries on. And I'm just going to kind of like place them out to see size-wise and position-wise where I want them. I might even cut down some of the berries to a smaller size, or use a smaller size that I have. You can vary the sizes. You can put them on in different locations. whatever works best for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my little bag of glue, and I'm going to kind of pinch the glue out of the tip, and then I'm going to take my scissors, I'm just going to snip the end off. So now I have a hole there, and I can actually just squirt my glue out instead. There's just a little bit there, and I can press it down. You can overlap your berries, you can make them totally separate. You are the artist in this instance, so you can do it however you would like. I do recommend trying odd numbers in groups or even across your entire design, as those tend to balance a little nicer. And if you get glue on the felt, it'll dry, so it's not a huge issue. So there is my mistletoe. And one of the reasons why I really do love this craft, it is so simple and it looks so nice, so it's very satisfying. So all you have to do now is hang it up or put it on your tree, whatever you would like to do. It is complete. So we completed our easy craft. Now we have our much more challenging craft, but it is still so super doable that even if you don't have any sewing skills, you will be able to do this no problem. Especially after you pick up a couple of minor skills, it'll be even easier. So this is the end product that we're making. You'll notice that there are stitches on both sides and a nice little loop here for you to hang it wherever you need to. And so you will need a couple of supplies to do this. If you registered for our program, you have in your bag 2 deer that were cut out on the Cricut so that you can use that to create your design. You could do this with whatever animal or shape you wanted to, so even if you did a star or a tree, you could do this. If you're wanting to recreate this at home, what I would recommend is find a nice shape that you want to use and go from there. Otherwise, if you want to use the deer, I just used a green or a brown piece of felt. You will also need a couple of different threads. So I'm using embroidery thread here, and it is wonderful because it has different layers, so it's really thick. This one is red. You'll need a piece of red, white, and black. The white for the spots on our deer, and the black for the eyes and the nose. And then, of course, this little twine for that hook. And then I also have included a needle for each of you. I'm using a tapestry needle because they're a little bit more thick and they have a larger hole to make it a little easier to stick your embroidery floss through. And then, of course, a pair of scissors to trim everything off when you're done. So to start, we're going to set aside some of these things. And we're just going to stick with one deer to start out with. I'm going to face my deer the opposite direction this time, so they're like matching, but maybe they're looking at each other on the tree. You're going to need your needle, and you're going to either start with your spots or your eyes and nose. Either way works. I'm going to just start with the eyes and nose to kind of give it a little personality to start out with. You're going to take your floss, and you're going to thread it through the hole. I am just going to lick it. I know that's like a weird thing at these days, but it helps to get it through the hole to stick together. Okay, and then there it goes. And I am actually just going to thread it through a little bit because the thread itself is so thick that you don't necessarily need it doubled up like you normally would for sewing. But I am going to tie a little knot at the end of my thread, my floss, so that it doesn't slip through once I get there. If you are really good at just leaving it and not pulling too tight, you can do that, but I don't trust myself to not pull my thread all the way through and have to start back over. So there's my knot. And I am going to start with my nose, and I'm just going to go through on the back side. The key here is to not go too close to the edge, or else you'll deform your felt and make it really thin, and maybe it'll poke through and tear through. So I'm just going to put my nose maybe right about there, kind of like the other one, and I'm just going to start. And you'll want to kind of hold on to this thread as you're pulling it through so it doesn't come undone. You'll notice I have a little bit of extra thread there. You can always trim it off, or you can just let it be because you're going to cover that up in the long run. And then you're just going to kind of poke it back through at a little bit of a distance. And you can do whatever shape you think works best for your nose. So I'm just going to kind of go down a little bit lower. And work it back up to that same spot. I'm going to go into the same spot that I went into last time. Although that's a pretty good looking nose right now, maybe. That's all I need. I think I'm going to leave it there. And now I'm not going to tie it off or anything. I'm just going to go and do my eye. And so you're just going to poke in through where you think the eye should be. Remember, this deer is in profile, so you're not going to do two. You're just going to do one. And I recommend kind of poking it through and seeing if that looks about right. I think it does. And I'm just going to pull it. Make sure not to pull it too tight, because you don't want to deform your face. And then just poke it back through. And I'm going to do it again because I want to make sure that my eye is big enough to see. I think on my original example I needed to do another one as well, but I didn't, so lessons learned. And you can kind of see my black thread there, but when I go and I add the back of my deer, I will make sure that I push that in as I'm doing the stitching around the edges. But otherwise, there's my eyes, my eye, and my nose, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to kind of go partway through the felt, not far enough with my needle, not far enough that I can see it on the other side, so you can't see my needle, but I'm just going to go through that top layer and pull it a little bit, and then loop back through the part that is not pulled tight yet, just to knot that. And I'm going to do it maybe one more time. You can always go through the other thread, whatever works best. Again, you can't see that from the other side. And I'm going to loop back through and pull it tight. And I'm going to just trim that off fairly short. And there is my nose and my eye. All right, so next we're going to thread the white thread onto our needle. Now, if you wanted to, you could add extra detail to the ears if you wanted to add that little fold that they have. I kind of like it just simple like this, but there's always more decoration that you can add. Okay, so same deal with our white thread. I find that if I pull it between my teeth a little bit, that helps to keep it kind of flat. You can also use your fingers, your fingernail, but since that hole is kind of flat, that definitely helps. And again, I'm going to just kind of pull that through a couple inches, enough so that it's not going to slip out too easily, and I am going to knot the end of my thread. So we're kind of making like a fawn here, a baby deer that has those cute little white spots on their back. You could do it without, of course, whatever you prefer. I'm gonna type one more time because I typed that really tight. All right, there we go. And again, we're coming in through that back side, the same side that we have all the goobers from our nose and our eye. And you're just gonna put them on the back. I would recommend, again, an odd number. You can do this as kind of an X, you could do this as a rectangle, whatever shape you want. I think this time, I didn't really do any X's over here, so this time I think I'll try that. Just pull it on through, and I'll just go a short distance to poke it back through the needle, and then pull it on through, make sure that it's tight enough. It's pretty small. You could always make those X's a little bigger, but then I'm just going to go and find a spot on that side of that string on that side and cross over it to make that X. And if you don't like the shape you made, you can always add more thread so that it doesn't show that same shape. Like, that X isn't quite perfect, but you know, I think it looks good because of course these are beautiful homemade crafts. And I'm going to add another X over here. I might make this one a little bit longer. Well, there are my spots. I think they're cute. I did them a little lighter than I did in my original one, but I think that it's a fun little shape, and we're going to tie it off the same way we did with our eye. So you're just going to thread your needle through that first layer of felt. And then you're going to stick your needle back through that loop you haven't pulled through yet, create that knot, and you will just pull that tight. Then you don't have to worry about any of your decorations coming apart. And spot. Making sure that I'm not going through every layer so that you can't see my knots from the front. And there we go. Just going to snip that off. And there it is. So the next step we have is we're actually going to take our loop, and this is kind of just a prep stage, but go ahead and figure out how long you want it to be. That was pretty long before. I'm going to maybe make it a little shorter this time. You're going to tie a knot. I wonder if that's even any smaller. A little bit smaller. And I'm gonna cut off some of that extra, just so it doesn't make it too bunched up in there. And I'm gonna pull it nice and tight. And this is gonna go on the back side of this one, and it's just gonna be smushed between your two layers. And the reason why I did this is we're actually gonna kind of sew into this to begin with. You could always glue this down. You do have you probably have some extra leftover glue from your mistletoe. But I think that sewing it in is just good enough, but that glue could do it for you too. So that's ready to go. I'm going to thread my red thread on my needle. And now I'm going to actually sew this on to the loop that I'm going to hang it with. I'm going to sew this on with this thread to start out with. You can go through it if you can, otherwise just looping around it will keep it somewhat secure, but I think I'm going to try and go through the twine with my needle. actually pulled straight through the twine, so I have it there, and that's fine. But I'm going to then make sure that I go back through and loop around it so that it stays. And at this point, that's somewhat secure. We can make it more secure, but that's what it'll kind of naturally happen that way as we go. If I had done maybe a bigger knot, it probably wouldn't have pulled through. So the next step you're going to do is you're going to start sewing your deer together. And to do that, you just need to make sure that you line them up as closely as you can. If you notice they're slightly off, that's okay, because you can kind of mush and push and pull this felt as you're going. So if it's not perfectly lined up right now, that's okay, but do try and get it as close as you can. And so now, this time, instead of just going through one layer, I'm going to push my needle through both layers. And again, make sure that you have plenty of felt that you're going through so it just doesn't tear straight through that edge. But then, this is a longer piece of thread, so it is a little bit more to manage. But then, there we go. We are started. And now I have my thread on the back side, and I'm going to try and create somewhat similarly sized stitches. This is called a running stitch. You could always do a different style, but it's running because it's just kind of back and forth from one side to the other. But I'm going to try and keep them similar. You'll notice over here that they're somewhat similar, but they're definitely not the same, and that is totally fine, because that is the beauty of a handmade ornament and craft, is that there's always little imperfections that make it perfect. Right, back through. And we're off. In the off chance that I have miscalculated on how much thread you need, I'm going to show you how to just string in some more so that you can keep going and finish your project. So I've gotten pretty short here and everything is all stitched up, but what you can do is, what you're going to do is just make sure that your thread is, your needle is on the inside of your deer. So I'm just going to poke that halfway through between both of the ears, and I'm just going to do a little knot, kind of like we had done before, so that it doesn't pop out at all. Make sure I'm not going through the whole way, and knot my thread. Okay, I'm going to pull that tight and just trim it off. And now I'm going to take that thread off, and I'm going to add more. Now this time when I come back through, I'm going to go basically on the other side of where that thread would have come into. It's a little too bad that this happened on the ear. I probably should have stopped a little sooner so that it wasn't in that tiny little piece of felt where it's for both of the knots, but just going to poke back through. And trim that thread down a little bit further. And try and poke both of them into the middle of the ear so that they don't stick out. And then I will just keep on going. And I noticed that I can see a little bit of the red thread on the side. I'm not too worried about that personally, but if you can make sure that it's nice and tight, it should kind of secure that well. And then off we go. Continuing on. Alright friends, I'm not going to lie, it's taken me about 40 minutes, maybe more, to get to this point, so this is not a very quick craft, but you know, you can always sit down and watch a holiday movie, or listen to a podcast, listen to music, hang out with family while you do this, so even though it's not the quickest thing, you can definitely still have a lot of fun while this goes, or while you sew. And I am just about to the end here. I am almost to the string where I started, and so I wanted to make sure that I showed how you could finish this. So we'll just do these last couple of stitches. And again, already my like string feels pretty solid for hanging, but I'm going to sew back through it to make sure that it does not pull out, because it's a lot harder to put back in once you get this all sewed up. So I'm going to try and go through right where I had gone through before, so that it kind of keeps with that pattern, since I am going all the way through again. That's a little bit longer stitch, but that's just fine. And back through. And this time I'm just going to kind of go back at the same spot that I had before, and I'm not going to go through the whole way. I'm going to try and come out at that hole. And I'm just going to tie a knot. This is probably not the most official way to do it. You might have a better idea. But I'm just going to tie a knot around the base of this. That's what I'd done over here, to just kind of make that secure and tight. So I'm going to take my needle off. And I'm just going to loop it around, stick my thread through, and try and cinch it down to the bottom and pull it tight. You can do that a couple times if you want. You don't necessarily have to, but it will make it a little bit more secure if it's just a couple times through. There's that, nice and tight, and I'm just going to snip it off. And there it is. Alright, so I have my two little deer that I can hang up looking at each other on the tree, or maybe I'll gift one to somebody else for them to enjoy this year as well. And I have my mistletoe felt crafts like this, and decorations that you can use year after year, known as heirloom crafts, rather than just a one and done. So they're really fun to make each year, but they're also fun to hand down, give to other people, and create a tradition maybe around a specific craft. Now each year I personally love to add a little handmade craft to my tree, so this year I'm really happy that I can add a deer. If you're interested in other holiday crafts, please check out Creative Bug that you have access to through your library account. There are tons of other crafts online. They have tons of other holiday crafts and cake decorating, cookie decorating, lots of fun things for all ages. So definitely check that out. And thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed.